Somewhere along the way, you were taught that more money would quiet your mind. That lie is everywhere, on billboards, in commercials, in perfectly edited feeds selling you peace in exchange for another zero. I'm Kyle, and what I want to dismantle today is the $100,000 illusion that quietly sabotages people right when they think they're finally safe. You believe six figures will shut off the anxiety, stop the late-night spiral, and create emotional insulation from uncertainty. It won't. Money is not therapy, it's leverage. And if your internal system is broken, more capital only gives your stress a larger arena to perform in. By the end of this breakdown, you'll understand why so many high earners feel just as fragile as they did at $30,000 and exactly how to separate your sense of safety from the number on your screen before it owns you. Strip the emotion away for a moment and look at the pattern. The moment income rises, spending quietly follows, not because you're irresponsible, but because your nervous system interprets surplus as permission. New car, better apartment, nicer dinners. The result, your margin, the space between income and collapse, stays exactly the same. This is why people earning six figures can still feel one paycheck away from disaster. The structure never changed, only the scale. I've watched individuals with $500,000 in liquidity panic over a minor home repair because they never built a system that separates survival from status. Money doesn't calm anxious people, it amplifies them. If your finances are ego-driven, $100,000 isn't a fortress, it's a larger cage with better furniture. Think back to the last milestone you chased. At one point, $50,000 felt like escape velocity. Then you reached it, and within months it felt normal. Now your mind is locked onto $100,000, as if that number holds the key. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The goalposts will move again the second you arrive. This isn't greed, it's biology. Your brain is wired to normalize gains and hunt for the next threat. Without a defined enough, wealth becomes an endless chase instead of a buffer. High earners often carry more stress than the middle class because they feel the fall more vividly. If your definition of safety keeps changing, you will never feel secure, no matter how high the balance climbs. Systems create safety, numbers alone do not. Breaking that loop requires first principles thinking, not affirmations. The first principle is simple but brutal. Capital exists for leverage, not comfort. The fastest way to stay anxious is to park your first $100,000 in cash and call it security. Real relief begins only when money starts carrying the weight of survival for you, when investments pay for life, not when life waits for investments. The second principle is the 24-month buffer. Anxiety thrives on undefined risk. You don't need millions to silence the what-ifs. You need clarity. 2 years of living expenses in liquid reserves turns fear into math. Everything beyond that becomes offensive capital. At that point, you're no longer trying to survive. You're positioning yourself to build something that outlives you. At some point, the real shift has to happen internally. This is the identity break, from striver to owner. Strivers chase upgrades. Owners accumulate engines. A striver walks past a luxury store and wonders if they can afford the product. An owner wonders how much of that company they already own. That single distinction collapses scarcity. Cash sitting still demands constant attention and fuels paranoia. Assets producing cash quietly create distance from fear. One requires vigilance, the other requires patience. Your brain may still react to market swings like a predator in the bushes, but logic must override instinct. Volatility isn't danger, it's discounted time. That's why the calmest people in the room are usually the most invested. There's one final mental shift that separates peace from chronic tension: the threshold of irrelevance. This is where you decide which numbers no longer deserve your attention.
When resources grow but your mental habits don't, you end up micromanaging pennies with a six-figure balance. That's not discipline, that's unresolved scarcity. If a decision costs less than a fraction of a percent of your net worth, it shouldn't consume emotional energy. Automate the trivial. Protect your focus for the variables that actually move the needle. Savings rate, debt load, income resilience. Wealth isn't obsessing over small costs, it's having the structure to ignore them. Focus creates peace. Noise recreates poverty, even in a well-funded life.
Relief doesn't come from having money. It comes from knowing exactly what that money is doing. So if you want the anxiety to actually disappear, the first move is structural, not motivational. Any high-interest debt has to die immediately, not later, not strategically. Interest above 10 to 15% is a leak that compounds faster than your investments ever will. Eliminating it isn't just a financial win, it removes a constant background threat your nervous system never stops tracking. Once that's done, you build what I call the Freedom Fund. Strip life down to its essentials, housing, food, utilities, and park 12 months of that number in a separate, boring account. This money has one job: preventing panic. It is not opportunity capital. It is not lifestyle capital. It is psychological insulation. Only after that foundation exists does the remaining capital get injected into growth, diversified assets, and a dedicated skill fund. Because here's the real secret. The calming realization isn't that you have money, it's that you know how to recreate it. When your earning ability is sharpened, markets lose their power to scare you. Anxiety thrives in chaos, not in numbers. That's why the next phase isn't restriction, it's visibility. For 90 days, everything gets tracked, not to punish yourself, but to replace fear with data. When your spending is vague, your brain fills the gaps with worst-case scenarios. When it's documented, the threat shrinks. Seeing $400 spent on dining out feels very different when it's surrounded by surplus. This is how data-driven calm is built. At the same time, your environment matters more than you think. If the people around you measure success in purchases, you'll always feel behind. If they measure it in autonomy, stress starts to lose its grip. Time wealth, waking up without urgency, is the real upgrade. And it only happens when money stops being a performance tool and becomes a boundary. Be honest about why you want wealth. Applause creates anxiety. Independence dissolves it. There's a common objection that always shows up here. But $100,000 isn't that much anymore. Correct. And that's exactly why it's the training ground. If you can't stay calm managing 6 figures, 7 figures will destroy you. Wealth doesn't remove emotional volatility, it amplifies it. That's why people blow up portfolios, chase shortcuts, and panic sell at the worst moments. Calm is a learned skill. Zoom out far enough and the noise disappears. Pull up a multi-decade market chart. Every crisis you've ever feared becomes a footnote. The mistake most people make is thinking safety requires more action. In reality, safety comes from fewer decisions. Set allocations, automate flows, stop touching the machine. Money performs best when ignored. Your job is not to babysit it, it's to build a life worth protecting. Over the next year, the objective isn't more hustle, it's fewer stress points. The first quarter is about removing fragility, eliminate consumer debt, and establish a basic emergency reserve. The second quarter is about intentional spending. Identify what genuinely improves your daily experience and cut the rest without guilt. Precision beats deprivation. The third quarter is automation. Income flows straight into investments before it ever hits consciousness, no willpower required. The final quarter is psychological calibration. Prove to yourself that money can enhance life without becoming identity. One intentional upgrade, no status, pure utility. By month 12, your finances should be boring, predictable, and mostly invisible. Growth should be happening by default. That's real success. Not excitement, stability. Not adrenaline, control. If you want this peace to last, there are a few behaviors that have to stop permanently. Constantly checking balances trains your brain to interpret volatility as danger. Comparing yourself to curated lives is emotional self-harm. Confusing shelter with investment distorts priorities. Neglecting health in pursuit of income is mathematically irrational. Over-concentrating assets ties your emotional state to a single chart, and hoarding cash out of fear guarantees slow decay through inflation. Each of these habits feeds scarcity. Correct them, and the background noise fades. What remains is clarity. You stop reacting. You start deciding. Here's the final truth. Money doesn't calm you. Competence does. Systems do. Automation does. $100,000 is not a cure, but the discipline required to build and structure it absolutely is. Your task now is simple. Choose one recurring survival expense and automate it this week. Remove one decision from your mental load. That's how peace compounds. The path to $1 million doesn't start with more ambition, it starts with less fear. Money is a phenomenal servant and a disastrous master. Build systems that put it to work, then step back and live. Don't chase the appearance of success. Engineer the absence of stress. That's real wealth.